Welcome to the Professional VMware vBrownbag's US edition. Today we're going to be discussing configuration management with Puppet. Our guest speaker is Jeremy Adams. And just some quick notes. You can follow the vBrownbag at the various hashtags or various accounts, and you can join in on the conversation using the vBrownbag hashtag. We have our various shows going across the various time zones. Our guest today is Jeremy Adams, and I'm your host, Ahmad Yunus. You can find me on Twitter at Ahmad_Yunus. I totally goofed that up. I'm now going to pass this on to Jeremy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us here in what's surely evening wherever y'all are at. Let me share my screen out and we'll be good to go. All right. Show that and show that. There we go. Perfect. Awesome. Again, my name is Jeremy Adams. I work for Puppet Labs, and I'm in our Technical Solutions Engineering group. Let me just throw up a very quick couple slides just for folks that aren't that well acquainted with Puppet Labs and what we do. And then I'll dive into some more meaty stuff here. And I think I gave us some pre-work. I don't know whoever was able to get it going, but basically just to pull down our learning VM and maybe get that fired up so that you can play along as we go through these things. So configuration management, this is a hot topic. Everybody has a slant on it, but the basic idea is that we need to make sure that the machines, that the devices that we're managing are in a consistent state. It's like having a contract, right? You can't build a house on sand in the same way you don't want to build up your infrastructure, your applications, the services that you deliver on a shaky foundation. And so configuration management essentially allows you to say, hey, I've got this contract. I'm going to guarantee that the infrastructure is going to be in a certain configuration. When I initially build a machine, I can take it up from a blank OS up to the IaaS layer, the PaaS layer, wherever I need to take it before I hand it off to the next person in the chain. And if I'm working in a collaborative way, which hopefully we all are, and we're working as a team, then we can make contracts between each other, between the teams, and we can share these contracts. We can share this infrastructure as code. So I can say, for example, that I want to define the way that the SSH service is on a machine to be that it's running, it's enabled at boot time, and you know what, it's going to watch its SSHD config file, and if there's changes there, I'm going to reload those changes. That way we start enforcing those. So that's just kind of a decision that needs to be made about how you want to run your infrastructure, and then you need to make it explicit. It's not caught up in the heads of a few people that know how things are set up. It's also not caught up in some documents that nobody really looks at often enough and aren't shared across organizations. So Puppet is a way to do that, to accomplish that. Through a language and a system of enforcing that desired state, you can achieve a lot of these benefits of the surety that comes from knowing that you've got a stable foundation to build on. And the way that we go about it is fundamentally through the Puppet language. That snippet you see at the top is exactly what it looks like. It's talking about the SSH service, and it's setting it up just the way we just described. Because we've got this DSL that describes the resources on your system and the way you'd like them to be set up, it then allows you to do some really interesting things. So as opposed to just saying, well, I'm just going to run these scripts to build this thing up, I don't really know what was there before. I don't really know for sure that things are in the right state when all the scripts have run, but I'm going to run all these scripts. Or I'm going to go through these run books. I'm going to go through this method of procedures document. I'm going to go through and do every step, click every button, and hopefully at the end, if I didn't skip something or get interrupted, whoever gets interrupted, right? It's going to be a perfect server at the end of the day. And so realizing that humans are really bad at doing repetitive tasks, but computers are really good, the idea is to put this stuff in code, put it in version control, and then test, ensure that it's doing exactly what we want it to do. And so what Puppet allows you to do is define your desired state for a system, and then, if you like, even simulate what that configuration is going to do. So Puppet will literally look at the current state of the system, compare it to your desired state, and say, are we already in sync here? Am I already in a running state for SSH and enabled at boot time, or do I need to make a change? You can get a report back that tells you what would need to change. Or you can go right to enforcement mode and actually have Puppet make the necessary changes to make that system reflect your desired state. Either way, you get a report about it. You know what happened at the end of those Puppet runs. You're not guessing what happened. The nice thing about this approach is also that you don't have to boil the ocean. You saw I had that very simple snippet of Puppet code, one little resource. Of course, that's not the sort of thing that's going to build a whole server, but it's part of that solution. And so what you can do with Puppet is you can start really small. You can just model one aspect of your system, something that's maybe a big pain point, something that's been hard or manual, something that's high value and low effort. Start there. And so maybe I'm going to make sure my sudoers file is set up correctly, and on all my systems I don't have any more hiccups with sudo. And then once I've conquered that, I could say, well, what else could I do? Well, I can also maybe make sure SSH is set up correctly, or my connection to LDAP that's set up correctly. Wow, look at that. My problems are starting to dissolve as I take care of these things, and I don't ever have to worry about them again. When you're doing things manually, you have to re-worry about them every time. When you do things with configuration management tools like Puppet, you define what you want, and then Puppet enforces it and reports back on the results. And then using tools that come to us from the development side, code management tools like version control, you can stick this Puppet code in version control, you can share it amongst teams, you can iterate on it, improve it over time, and so you really get kind of the best of operations and the development practices brought to bear. And once you conquer the kind of infrastructure at the operating system layer, you can start going up the stack, right? And say, maybe I'm going to attack making sure that my app servers and databases are configured properly on all of my machines that are of that type. Or then maybe I even want to make sure that I can get certain artifacts deployed, and I want to make sure a WAR file gets to my Java app server, for example, at a certain version of my application, and ensure that sort of thing. So Puppet lets you start small and then build up to a full stack. And then for the folks that have never really, maybe they've run Puppet a little bit, maybe they've done a Puppet run, they've applied a little bit of Puppet code on a machine, this is kind of the execution flow. I think it's really important to just wrap your head around. There's a Puppet server, the Puppet master server, right? That's where all of your module code, where all of the Puppet code resides. And then your agents check in, they phone home with the master. You can have Linux, Unix, Windows agents. It's all the same to Puppet. It's all Puppet code in those modules. And depending on what those machines are set up to receive, they will get a set of that Puppet code compiled for them into an artifact called the catalog. So how does this work? An agent, like this Linux agent on the right, it wakes up, the daemon wakes up and says, oh, 30 minutes or whatever you've set it to, time to check in with the master to make sure I'm compliant with the desired state. It will then collect a set of facts about itself. Things like IP address, architecture, memory-free, number of CPUs, virtual or not, etc., right? But these facts could be really anything you want them to be. The sky's the limit here, and you can use any type of executable. So if you got some PowerShell scripts that crank out some good facts for you, awesome. If you've got some shell scripts or some Perl scripts or Ruby or Python or whatever lying around that are going to give you key information you need to know and have reported consistently about your machines, you can have a fact. Then the master can use those facts to decide what sort of Puppet code ought to be given his machine. Oh, is this like the extra large size web server? Okay, we need to give it the beefed up Apache configuration that we've got set up here. Or, this is a Windows machine serving up an IIS app. Well, we know that because the fact of the operating system is Windows and the way that the memory and CPU are configured, we know that this is one of these web server machines for us. So we get the catalog back, which contains all of the resources and all of the information that is needed for that agent to configure itself. And it's not just sent back in raw code either. What we essentially build is a graph of resources. Dependencies are resolved in this compiled catalog. So if you go in there and you say, yeah, that SSHD service, I want to make sure it's running, and then later in another piece of Puppet code you said you wanted it to be stopped, you're going to get a compilation error. That's crazy talk. That doesn't work. That's the kind of thing that used to happen when you'd run a bunch of shell scripts in a row, and one shell script would undo what the other one did. That's not what we're in the business of doing here. We want consistency. So that compilation process will make sure that things that have to happen before other things do happen in that order, and make sure you don't duplicate and overwrite what you meant to do in the first place. Well, we let the agent go and configure itself at that point, and then when it's done, it'll send a report back to the master telling us all of the wonderful things that it did to bring us into our desired state. Okay, perfect. We'll get into a little later how this classification thing works. How do we know what machine gets what code? But we'll dive into that in just a second. And then, for all the folks, all the hardcore VMware heads in the room, you should just kind of know this is a real eye chart slide. But the point is that Puppet Labs and VMware have been working very closely together for quite a while now. I know I went to a couple of VM Worlds myself recently, and it was really cool to see people working together and kind of see some of the neat overlap and the opportunities for the different products to work together, and like how VCHS, now vCloud Air, used Puppet Enterprise under the hood to build up that service, and how we have a great integration with vRealize, formerly VCAC, in order to kind of build up these self-service portals or internal cloud offerings. So there's a lot of great stuff there, but we will kind of step off of the slideware now and get into the meat of things. So I'm going to go over to my VMware Fusion install that I've got over here, and for anybody that indeed was able to get the Learning VM downloaded, that's what I've got running here, and I'm going to actually show you all, in case you haven't, how that goes down. Basically, just go over to puppetlabs.com/download-learning-VM. That's a really annoying URL. But if you just go to puppetlabs.com itself, and then you can see there's a bunch of different resources here. You can go and click on this Get Started link, and you can literally just download the full-blown Puppet Enterprise installer if you want to just throw it onto a machine that you've got lying around already. The Learning VM is more of an appliance, so I'm going to click Learn here. It's more of an appliance that's based on a quest-based learning methodology. So, you click on that and you click Start Now down here by the Learning VM, and there you get to the download page for that. You just download it, decide what format you want it to be on. I've got mine running on VMware Fusion. You can run Oracle VirtualBox or things like that as well. And then you just fire the thing up and you're good to go.
So Jeremy, we have a question.
Yeah, please.
Can facts be anything stored in your DB and then queried by external software via API?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So let's just kind of jump into that. So I'm sitting on a master right now, a master server, and but it's, any machine that's got Puppet on it. So you got a separate binary called factor. This is what actually gets run when I was kind of showing that flow over here where the facts are being submitted. That is basically factor is being run on that agent machine. And you see we get a whole array of things that get returned here. things like this one is a CentOS box. That's the operating system family, Red Hat, OS, CentOS, things about all these different things, right? FQDN, etc. Now, the kind of question is, can I have some custom facts that are, it sounded like a couple of questions, like maybe one about custom facts and one about querying them from the Puppet DB, perhaps? Maybe I'll take it that way. That sort of a scenario,
that's what he's asking.
Okay, perfect. So the way that would work, here's just kind of one example. We've got this stock set of facts, 50 to 100 different facts, right, that come built into Factor. So the minute I want to create a new fact, it's really, really easy. I would typically write this in some Puppet code to memorialize it. The basic flow is something like this. Create a directory, call it etc Puppet Labs Factor facts.d. Not on that device. That one's all full up. Let's go to our learning VM, since that way everyone can kind of play along with the same device here. So I'm going to go here to etc Puppet Labs, right, and take a look. And let me see if I can reverse that. There we go. So it's not so great that way either, but etc Puppet Labs there, and I'm going to create a directory here called Factor facts.d. Okay, so the idea is any kind of an executable that you put into this directory that outputs something in the form of key equals value will give you a brand new fact that you didn't have before. So like if I say, for example, that I want to make a fact, let's do that really quick. Let's make a fact, and it doesn't really matter what the name of the file you put it in is, but let's make a fact that's just a shell script here. And I'll just put a little shebang here for bin bash, and then I'll just have it echo out for me that we want to have our broadcast equal to vBrownbag, something like that. And I'll just chmod that, execute that guy. And now if I try that script out, you can see that I get this return value of broadcast equals vBrownbag. Now if I run Factor on this machine, we're going to have to see, like, do we get that result back? So Factor of, let's do it to less here, and you'll see that I've got now a new fact. Broadcast is vBrownbag, shown right smack in the middle of the screen right there. So this fact is going to be reported up to the Puppet master as well the next time that Puppet runs. So if I were to run Puppet here, Puppet agent -t, so this is the agent that's running here. Every machine, whether it's a master server or just an agent, has got an agent running on it. Puppet literally manages itself with Puppet. So it's going to, as its first step up here, this first thing where it says loading facts, it literally was generating all the different facts that we needed and submitting them up to the master server. All right, so let's like flip the screen colors back here and actually go to the master server. So I've got my Puppet Enterprise console up here, and if any of you folks dug into the guide that comes along here, you'll see the login credentials are puppet at example.com and learning Puppet. That's the username and password for the console. So I'm going to do that. Wow. Thank you. Must have been really slow here. There we go. Perfect. So now I can actually, this is the Enterprise console here, and if I click on this node that we're interested in, we see some classification information we'll get into in a little bit. And if I go down, I'll see the reports that have run on this machine as well. And if I go down a little bit farther, you can see I've got that nice fact of broadcast vBrownbag, right? So this could be anything I want, right? This could be the data center I'm in. This could be the role for this server. This could be really anything that I want. And then kind of as a second part to the question, there is a central place where the facts, let's kind of go back to this shot here, where the facts, the catalogs, and the reports are stored. There is this entity known as Puppet DB, which is where the Puppet Master puts all of that information. And because the facts, the catalog, and the report are all in Puppet DB, it turns out that you can query against Puppet DB using a REST API and extract things out. So if you'd like, you can go in there and check on the status of your nodes by or get information about your nodes by querying against the Puppet DB's REST API. And if you're interested in doing that, all you really have to do is look for Puppet DB REST API, and you're going to get some great documentation like this that basically shows you how to curl against Puppet DB and pull out facts for your machine. And you can do really kind of complex queries as well to find something like, for example, here are the ones that are that would match certain criteria. For example, you can extract things out in that sort of a way. Another really good way to do that, if you're interested, is there's some really nice modules on the Puppet Forge. So, if folks are wondering where you get some of this Puppet code that you can start working with, definitely go to the Puppet Forge, forge.puppetlabs.com, and there you're going to find an assortment of modules, things including like the Puppet supported modules that are supported along with PE, you can call in and ask for help on, or the Puppet approved modules. These are ones from the community that have been judged to be really high quality and meeting our standards. And then you can just kind of search for things you're looking for. There's almost 2,800 of them up here at this point. So there's some really nice stuff up here, like there's a Puppet DB query module here from Eric Delen at Spotify, and that's a great set of tools here that allow you to take some of those things that you would do either in REST calls that you might want to do on the CLI. You can go ahead and just use that via this module here. It'll give you that kind of capability through Puppet's faces, which basically lets you extend the Puppet command. So this would extend the Puppet command to have this new query subcommand that would let you query against Puppet DB. It's got Ruby bindings, and it's got some functions that you can slip into your Puppet code as well. So it's a really, really great module. I would encourage you to check out anything from Eric in that vein. So thanks for that question. Hopefully that was satisfactory for you. At this point, and it's hard to know exactly what everyone's different familiarity level is with Puppet that's in the audience, but you can certainly ask questions. And otherwise, I'm also just going to kind of keep plugging along with some simple examples that probably anybody can follow along with. If you've got your Learning VM up, of course, the other thing you can do is you can just SSH over to that thing. And the credentials for that are root and Puppet, just Puppet, I think. Yeah, root and Puppet. And so, a much nicer experience here instead of me having reversing my screen here for you guys. This is going to look a little bit nicer, hopefully. So here I am again on that machine, and so what it provides you with is a nice sandbox to play in, because I've got a master and I've got, of course, the agent that comes along with everything. And there you could just start playing around and understanding how it is that Puppet does its thing, right? How is it that Puppet is able to actually ensure that your system is in a desired state? And the way it does it is because Puppet has this thing called the RAL, the Resource Abstraction Layer, and it allows you to look at the resources on your system and see what state they're in. So you can literally introspect at any time on any system, Windows, Unix, Linux. You can use the Puppet resource command and check it out. So if I want to see Puppet resource user, I get to see all of the user resources on my machine. Whereas if I want to look at a particular user, I can do Puppet resource user root, for example, and I get to see that's the root user described to me in Puppet code by Puppet. So that is the current state of the user. I don't need to know whether I'm on Ubuntu or CentOS or Red Hat or what have you, or AIX. This command will work. It'll work on Windows as well. I don't have to worry about which OS I'm on. I just run Puppet resource user, and I can see the local users. Well, at that point, I've got, I'm in a good position to start doing things like managing users. So I can literally just say, hey, I'm just going to start playing around with my local users by doing things like editing a file like this and saying, all I really care about maybe on my root user is ensuring that his UID and GID are correct, and maybe I've got and the password, say maybe that, and say the shell, right? So at this point, maybe that's exactly the way I'd like my root. I need the root user to be set up. So this is literally Puppet code, so I can apply. If you're running Puppet code locally, you can do it in a Puppet apply mode. And if you'd like to put your Puppet code on the master and have it serve out to 1, 10, 1,000 agents, then you put it on the master, and we'll do that in just a second. But Puppet apply is a great way to do it just on a single machine, great for testing or in certain circumstances where you don't have access to a master. So I'm going to apply what's in this Puppet manifest right now, this Puppet code file, and you can see that it got compiled. Even with just one resource, it still got compiled to make sure it was valid, and there was nothing to do because we're already in sync with the way that we want things to be. This is the way we said things should be. This is the way Puppet sees the world. There's nothing different. Everything's exactly the same. So the minute you go ahead and change something like the password for the root user to something completely different, now the way we want things to be and the way things actually are on the system is now different. See, this ends in 5.3 dot, this is 1m/, yeah, different now. And Puppet will notice that. So if you want to have Puppet now apply that configuration, it'll notice it, it'll change it back and let you know about it. And here you can see, hey, root password got changed. And then if I run Puppet again, now it'll say, oh, they're the same, nothing for me to do. And we can indeed, validate that by looking at what we wanted it to be and the way Puppet actually, the way the system actually is. So this is fundamentally how Puppet works, whether you're building, doing one resource or if you're building up an application. If you're building up an application, you're going to need more, you're going to need some modules, right? You're going to need some ammo. And so we can look really briefly at what it's like to actually use some of this stuff. So we're going to go to Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet, and we're going to go to modules, and we're going to take a look in here. And right now there's one module that's in place that's part of the learning VM, and I'll let you kind of play with that as an exercise with this learning VM. Definitely do go through that, the quest-based learning. There's this whole quest command, and you can start up a quest and follow along and have progress and the whole thing. And I haven't completed anything. I'm a failure at this point. But I encourage you to get started and play with that if you're getting started with Puppet especially. But one of the things you can do is see which Puppet modules you currently have on your system using the Puppet module command, Puppet module list, and then you can pull down modules that you might want that you see on the Forge using the Puppet module install command. So these modules here, you can see this kind of directory here in my module path. This is typically where I would put modules that I'm using. That I've created or I've pulled down from the Forge. This namespace here under Puppet Share Puppet modules, those are typically modules that are being used by Puppet Enterprise itself. And so that's kind of a simple distinction. That way we don't have a kind of a cluttered module path. It's also possible to set this all up with environments as well, so that you could have dev, test, and prod environments, and they would just basically go in their own directories, have their own unique module paths, so you could have your own set of modules for dev, test, prod, for example, or whatever your different environments happen to be. But I'm kind of keeping it simple with the Learning VM. And so what we might want to do is say, turn this machine into, say, an Apache web server, or I might want to take this machine and ensure that I've got NTP running on this machine, something like that. So let's take a look and see what we have right on here right now. Let me see if I have, so NTPD. Let me actually use then, let's say NTP is something that we definitely want to have on this machine. Let's have Puppet help us configure that. So I'll go to the Forge. I'll say, oh look, here's this Puppet Labs module for NTP. I want to use that module, so I'll just copy and paste this Puppet module install. And this is the key of the way the Forge works. There's a namespace of the author's namespace. In this case, it's Puppet Labs, and then dash NTP here. So I'm just going to throw that down on the command line, and I'm actually going to reach out to the Forge, and you can see NTP got installed. It also made sure that it had any dependencies of NTP, and you can see those here on the web page. So you can see it needed standard lib greater than or equal to that version there. So the nice thing also, just to note as you're getting started with Puppet, is that most of these are backed up by GitHub, and so you can go right to the code and start seeing how some of these really high quality or advanced modules are written, so that you can kind of use some of those techniques to write modules yourselves. So once I've got this module down, I'll just ls here, and you'll see I've got this NTP module here. And the NTP module, and pretty much all modules that have parameters that you can inject into them to change the way they act, it's basically kind of like an API. So if I look at the NTP module and I look into its entry point, the init.pp, you can see I've got this whole slew of parameters here, ways I can adjust the way that the NTP module works. And what you'll see are these things called classes, which are just a way to put a name, to put a handle on on a set of Puppet code, so that I can later assign it to a set of machines. So in this case, I might be interested in what NTP servers that my machines are getting. Turns out the NTP module pre-calculates parameters for you using some sane defaults based on which operating system you're running and such. So I can literally just use NTP with nothing, with no parameters given, because the parameters it's got will just work. So that's one way I can start using it. So now you're like, okay, well, how? And I've got this module down. It's on the master. It's in my module path, right? I'll actually look at that. Puppet config print module path. Sure enough, you can see there's a lot of these Puppet type commands. That's perfect. It's in my module path. That's where I'm at. So now let me go over to my master and actually kind of link up this machine that I'm on with that module. So what you do in the Enterprise console is you could go and add some classes here, and I'm just going to start typing in NTP, and sure enough, you can see NTP is the main class, and there's a bunch of constituents here, but NTP is the one that I want, and I'm just going to add that class in. Now it's in my set of classes, my palette, if you will, that I can draw from for classifying nodes. And then I can either form up a group, like I could have a group here like my web servers or what have you, or I can just go directly to an individual node, an individual machine, and I can add this bit of classification right to it. So I can go right here to my Learning VM and edit it and add another class on top of the ones that it has currently, and then just update it. And now the next time that Puppet agent runs on this machine, it's going to, in addition to all of these things, it's going to pick up this new class. So literally all I have to do at this point is run Puppet. So I'm going to run that Puppet agent. So I'm literally sitting on the master machine, but the agent is going to check in with the master that's running on that same machine, and it's going to pull down whatever the new configuration it has is. And you can see a bunch of edits just went by, right, for my NTP conf file. And you can see that I actually then turned on the service. It needed to be running. It changed from stop to running. And now if I check my service NTPD status, now it's running. And I should have, at this point, a report back on my master here, and you can see there's now not a green check mark but a blue. There is a change which just took place. And if I go in here and I look down, you can see the difference here where these are reports. Everything was in sync with the way it needed to be every time it checked in. And right here we have a change. And we can go in and we can see how many resources were managed. We have 219 managed. 2 of them were out of sync and got changed. And we can kind of look at the log entries here, including this annoying message, this warning here at the top. And we also can see the actual 2 resources that were changed right here. The content of this ntp.conf file got changed, and the actual NTP service was changed from stop to running as well. And this is pretty cool in that I can see, I can actually see the file here, so I can actually see what the kind of the saved version, we actually file bucket or kind of save off a backup copy of the old conf file when we change a file, and you get to see that you can actually see what it was changed from. And this is really valuable if, like, people keep changing things from what your authorized config is. You can kind of get a view into what was changed there. So this is perfect, right? So now the next time, very similar to our whole root user example, if I run Puppet again, as long as nobody's come in and changed anything on the machine in the interim, we should actually have a clean run here, and there should be no changes. The catalog will be compiled, but it'll finish and there won't be any changes necessary. And indeed, if we go back here and I look either at my nodes view here, and I'll have a nice green check mark, and if I go in and look at that latest report, we'll see that all of the 219 resources I'm managing are already in their desired state, no changes at all, including the things down here that have to do with including all of my NTP configuration here, like my NTP conf file and all that sort of thing. So it's really kind of nice that you can see this view here. And if you're ever wondering, where a particular resource gets defined, we'll literally have the path to the Puppet code and the line number there, so that I can literally say, oh, really? Let me see, what's going on there. Let me go down to line 20. Oh, sure enough, that's that conf file. So, that's where it literally got set in the Puppet code. And you can see that this is a really nicely kind of abstracted, setup here, so that for different operating systems, we know which path the config file for NTP server should be in, and it gets filled in here. So it just kind of gives you an idea of how you can grab a module and start using it on one of your machines. Another example might be, how can I create my own module? What if I want to make my own first module? How hard is that? Let's see if I have that. Well, you have tree on here. So, truth be told, making modules is dead simple. If you can make directories, you can make modules. So let's kind of do our first module, maybe really, really fast. And this is, again, something that anyone can play along at home with. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to my master, and I'm going to take the NTP class off of here just for fun. I'm going to remove this class and update it. And because I'm actually going to create kind of a baseline module for my Linux machines. And so all I'm going to do is literally make a directory. I'm going to call it baseline. And now I'm going to go in there and create another directory called manifests, where it holds my Puppet code. And then I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make a single file. This is the entry point to every module. Every module will have this init.pp, and every module will in there have a class, which is the namesake of the module, class baseline. We're done. So that's the first module. It does nothing, but it gives you, an idea. That's the module right there. That's all you really need to do to make a module. So then, the nice thing about modules is I can start to use modules to compose Puppet code that maybe someone else has written on my team, something I've gotten off the Forge. I can start to pull these things together, even with resources and things, simple resources that I have kind of laying around. I can start to pull all of these things together and make myself a module that works for exactly what I want it to do. So in this case, if I wanted to make a baseline module that managed NTP a certain way for this machine, so I wanted to actually use, you'll see this in the Puppet language, you'll see this thing called an include, where you can just say, just use NTP with no parameters, just use the defaults, done. Or you'll see people using this syntax like this. Class, I want a class included called NTP. And this is using it just like any other resource, like a file, a package, a service, a class, NTP. This is the same thing, NTP with no parameters to it. But if I wanted to maybe customize a little bit the way NTP worked, I wanted to use one of those parameters I saw on that long list of parameters. Maybe I want to add in, pool.ntp.org. Maybe that's like the particular server that I want my machines to use. Well, cool. Now I've just tweaked the NTP module, the way the NTP module is going to work for me without touching the NTP module itself. I'm using its interface, if you will, the fact that it's got this server's parameter, but I don't have to affect that underlying code. I'm just wrapping it with my new baseline module. And then at that point, I could say, yeah, and I also want to make sure that the root user is covered in this config as well. So I could literally take that and tack that into my baseline there, and let's go back and edit that baseline again. And maybe I want to just put this guy in here, a little indentation action here. And like we were saying before, maybe I don't care about every aspect of this guy, but there's a couple things that are sacred to me. And so, boom. So now it's like I've got this nice little module. It does a couple of things, and a couple of things only. It manages NTP for me and sets the server, and then it manages my user root for me. And now that I've got this all in a module, I could apply this to one machine or 100 machines, what have you. And so when you're writing your own modules, you're going to want to make sure that everything is looking good in there. And so there's a couple of good tools for this. You can get Puppet lint down. A lot of people use JavaScript. Maybe they've seen like JS lint, or there's various linting tools out there for style and things like that. And then we also have built in the Puppet parser validate command. So I can look in there and say, let's just validate to make sure I didn't make any gross syntax errors, which if it returns with nothing, you're good. So now, going back over here to my Puppet master, I'm thinking about classifying machines again. So now I want to actually add in my baseline class, and there it is that I just made. And it shows up here because it is a well-formed module. That's why we write modules with this manifest directory and an init file that have that name of the module, a class with the name of the module in it. That's how Puppet's able to auto-discover these modules like this. And now that I've done that, I can literally go and classify one of my machines here. I can edit its classification, and this time, instead of giving it NTP and maybe a whole host of other things, sudoers, SSH, root user configuration, etc., I just give it the baseline module. And I update it, and now I'm going to be receiving the baseline next time I check in. And so now if I run my Puppet agent on this machine, let's see, I hear my laptop is whirring violently in the background. There we go. And some folks might wonder what this -T thing is all about. It's short for --test, and it's just a mode that puts everything kind of in the foreground for you, so that you can see kind of some verbose output and see everything in the foreground. And we get to see there's some interesting results here. So you can see that in the NTP conf file previously, we had from our NTP module the defaults of these 3 NTP servers. But now we're using the NTP server that I specified, right? And because we changed that content, and because the NTP service was basically subscribing to the file, was watching that file for changes, it got a refresh. And so now it's going to restart itself and pulled in those changes. And yeah, everything else ran completely clean and green on that. So if I go back to my enterprise console, and you can also look at this, all these reports sequentially in this reports tab, I'll be able to see, yep, there's that change to the NTP conf file, and here's the old version of it that got changed. So it's like a really nice way to be able to see what changes occurred in your infrastructure and whether there were ones that you expected, whether you're simulating or you're actually enforcing the changes. So that is kind of a basic idea of how you could create your own module. Like I say, it's that simple to create a module. Just shove some Puppet code in a class that is named after your module, right? Just if you have a baseline module, make sure there's a baseline class, and that just holds whatever resources you want in there, whether you're calling some other Puppet class you have from a module, whether you're using standard resources like the user, file, package, service, etc., and go look for more of those resources at puppetlabs.com. Look at the Puppet type reference, right, is a great resource for finding out everything you wanted to know and some things you didn't about, all these different resources. Like, here's that user resource. We only used a fraction of the possible attributes that you could use for a user resource, but there's all of these great resources in here that you can find out more about, like how to use the file resource and all the different ways as well. So there's all kinds of really good information online here in the docs for that as well. Were there any burning questions queued up at the moment?
Not right now.
Perfect. Okay. This is kind of, I think, an interesting, maybe for some of the folks that are wondering about some of the, some of the other integrations that are out there with VMware, or some of the things that are coming in the future from Puppet Labs. Feel free definitely to type in your questions, and we'll get to those as well. But
so we just now got a question.
That, one of the reasons that, oh, that's awesome. Good, fire away.
All right. Can you address the dev QA prod config a little more?
Yeah, definitely. So the way that looks, let me show you on a master, which I've apparently got no space left on the device, but in other ways, it's in good configuration. So I've got this master here that's set up in that type of a configuration. So whereas we saw on the other machine, we had something like Etsy, Puppet Labs, Puppet, and then we went straight to modules. With environments, you have this setup that looks like this. You have an environments directory, and in there you would have your different environments. So I could have a production environment. I could have, Dev 1 environment if I had some space on this disk. You could have a Dev 1 environment, Dev 2, test, UAT, whatever you want to call the environments. And the idea is that for every environment, you can have your own set of modules. So the beautiful thing about that is that, say for example, you've got in production a certain set of modules like the NTP, your Apache, or if you're on Windows, maybe you've got registry module and some IIS modules and what have you. You've got all your modules and they're at certain versions, right? Both the modules that you've written and like here's a bunch of modules I've gotten from various places, and they're all at these different versions, right? Including this one that does some really crazy stuff to stress out my machine for load testing. The idea here is that you can specify that I want these exact modules at these exact versions, and then deploy exactly those modules at those versions to an environment. And then when your agents check in, you can have them checking in to a particular environment. So you can have your production machines checking in to the production environment. And maybe I've got these exact same modules, right, in my test environment, but they're all at newer revs, right? So maybe I'm running like the bleeding edge version of a bunch of these modules in my test environment. And I'm validating to make sure that it still passes all of my tests, it does everything I need it to do, but I don't want that code in production. It's not ready for production yet. So what you need to manage something like that is you need a tool, right, a way to manage that. And so for folks that are going to set up environments like this and that are going to want a way to actually manage which modules at which versions, there's really only like there's a couple of choices for sure, but there's maybe a couple that I would recommend to everybody that are interested in that. On the Puppet Labs doc site, go ahead and look up directory environments. And directory environments, that's going to talk to you about how to set them up. And basically, you would have, again, one directory per environment, and it'll show you how you need to set everything up. And there's literally a guide in here, I saw it down here as well, on how to configure them, what you need to put in your puppet.conf file, and how to create a directory environment. And you can see this kind of drawing here gives you an impression of what that looks like, where you have your different environments, whether they're based just on like a Git version control branch, or whether they're named by some formal name like test or prod or what have you. You put in each of them your unique modules and whatever things you need in there. Now, in order to manage getting that code over to those machines, that's where I would start looking at a project like R10K. And R10K is, there's other great projects out there like Puppet Librarian is another really good project out there that's very similar in thrust. And the idea of R10K is that you set up a Puppet file, which basically has in it that format that we were just kind of talking about. So this format of modules and version numbers. So let's look up an R10K Puppet file, and if we look at one of these here, you can start to see what they look like. So this is a Puppet file that's saying give me the module Apache and get it from GitHub, right? Or give me the module Apache from the Forge, the latest one. Or give me the module Puppet Labs Apache from the Forge at this version, right? Or get it from Git, or get it from Subversion, or what have you. So the idea is that you would specify this file that said, get me this thing from version control, from a commit hash, from the Puppet Labs Forge, what have you, and deploy this to a certain environment on my master so that when agents check in there, they're going to get the correct code applied to them. So that's the way you really want to get things set up, is having an automated way to specify this sort of thing. And literally what you do is you keep that Puppet file for your prod in version control itself, right? It's just another piece of plain text that says, for prod, I need these 10 modules at these 10 versions, and for dev, I need these 9 modules at these 9 particular versions. And R10K is a tool that will actually collect all that stuff and put it out on the master into the right environment directory for you so that your agents will get the right code assigned to them. I don't know, did anybody see the preview of the next generation Puppet server today? We did a webinar earlier today. If anybody saw that, we went into some of kind of the future way that classification and things like that are going to be done. And again, it's kind of like very much in line with this. This is the next version unreleased of Puppet Enterprise, and so I'll just like fire this up since you guys are all online here. Thanks for spending your time with us. This is the next version of Puppet Enterprise, and what I wanted to show you all was that, you know, we talked about facts on machines and how you can have custom facts. We talked about environments a little bit, and a little bit about classification, right? How we make sure a machine gets certain Puppet code. Well, I just wanted to show you this because it's really cool. In the next version of Puppet Enterprise that will be coming out pretty soon, classification really got cool. So the idea with classification here now is when I want to have a Linux baseline, for example, I actually use rules based on facts that I have to determine who gets what. So you think about this in like a cloud environment or an environment where you want to have the attributes of the machines dictate how they should be configured. That's exactly what you get here. So here I'm saying all my machines that have the kernel Linux fact that matches these set of machines, I want them to all get NTP. And then I could add in parameters like my servers, right? I could add that all in right here, for example. So this is just a really, really cool way of doing classification, rule-based, which is going to be a brand new way that things are done in Puppet Enterprise. You'll still be able to have specific nodes getting, if you want to kind of have a certain node get a classification, you can still pick them out individually, but it's really neat to have this rule set up. And there's also, of course, role-based access control to determine who can actually affect the classification of these things. So it's called Puppet Node Manager. It's a brand new deal. It'll provide, like I say, this GUI access, and even really interestingly for integration stories like we might see with VMware tools, you'll have there's a RESTful API as well. So you can literally blast in some JSON like this, and you will actually be able to set or update the classification of your machine and the rules and the particular classes that are applied all from this REST interface. So if you're building machines or running something from vRealize or any of these type of things, having this REST interface is going to be really, really cool in the future here.
So we do have another question.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so can Puppet perform an automated workstation build process versus doing apps on an existing machine? If so, how would you launch the process from a blank machine?
Yeah, definitely. So the idea is that, with Puppet, you need to basically have the Puppet agent on the machine. Once you've got the Puppet agent on the machine, you can pretty much, the sky's the limit. If you started looking at the Puppet Labs Forge and you start seeing the extent of all of the different sorts of things you can manage, literally up to, people handle their entire builds, down to if you're kind of starting from either bare metal or starting from firing up, kind of empty VM containers and you're not working from templates, you can certainly take a look at the Razor project. And the Razor is actually in tech preview right now. I've been using it. It works pretty cool, and I definitely recommend you take a look at it. The idea with Razor is that it allows you to do the provisioning steps, whether, like I say, with bare metal or if you're like spinning up VMs and you'd like to install you install the OS. It'll install the OS. It'll then pass it off to Puppet. It'll actually put a Puppet agent on it and then can send off classification information as a last step and do a handoff to the Puppet master. And then imagine, right, if you've got these machines, even at the very beginning, they've got facts. They've got facts like how many CPU cores. They got facts like how much memory and disk you've given it, right, even as like just a VM container. And then at that point, you can start building these things up and handing them off to Puppet. Puppet could say, oh, it's one of these machines, these extra large database machines. Cool, I'm going to give it the database classification. Once you start using these rules, right, you can start doing things like that. So whether they're, Amazon nodes or vCloud Air nodes, or they're these nodes that are coming in through the Razor provisioning server, you can then have them get built out into their finished configuration. So it's really, really powerful. You'll see that as like one way to kind of accomplish that. And then there's going to be just some more very interesting ways to do kind of orchestration workflows and like discovery of machines that are not currently managed by Puppet and getting Puppet agents put onto them. That's also coming, and so that'll be something to look out for. That'll also allow you to do that if you've got a lot of brownfield machines that you'd like to kind of bring into the Puppet fold. Cool. Any more questions?
Yeah, we got, let's see. How would you initiate multiple machine agents checking in at the same time?
Yeah, definitely. Like, that kind of coordination is something that, everybody needs to do from time to time. So the way you do that is we literally have a parallel system here, right? So we saw this this image here, right, where we've got the Puppet runs that are happening periodically. They're initiated by the agent. But you could imagine if I drew a line here that showed like a message bus, right, that everybody was connected to. All the agents, the master, everybody. Well, we have such a thing, and it comes built right out of the box with Puppet Enterprise. It's called M-Collective. And the idea of M-Collective is that we want to have a kind of a secondary way to get into our machines and to control them. So I could look here on this machine. Let me actually just change over to the user that's for M-Collective. And let me do a little MCO ping on the message bus. So I've got a couple of machines that are currently listening on the message bus right now. And then you've got these simple plugins that allow you to do things like, I want to run Puppet once on these machines, on everyone that responds. And now I've just triggered to have Puppet run on those two machines. There's a lot more options than that. Like I could say, I want to do them in batches of, if I had a bunch of machines, I want to do them in batches of 4 with a sleep between them of, of 30 seconds or something like that. In that, you could set up things like that if you want to get your classification set changed on some machines and then have them check in. That's totally something you can do. You can do that, of course, through the command line, and you can invoke that through other orchestrators if you get VCO or something like that running. But of course, it's also available in the GUI as well. And so if I go here to live management, you can see this is, of course, on a different machine. Now we're back over to our other machine of the learning VM. But you can see on the learning VM, I've only got one machine in this environment. But here it is, right? And I can go here and control Puppet and say, I'm going to run Puppet once on that machine, and bam, same thing. If I had 20 machines, they'd all be listed on the left. I could select and deselect. I could filter them, based on a class that they've got on them, based on a fact, like, OS family is, Red Hat, then, filter me out the ones that are Red Hat nodes. And it's literally sending a message out on the bus saying, hey, who's out there that's Red Hat? Okay, who's out there that's got, kernel Windows? Hopefully nobody, right, in this case, because I don't have a Windows machine that's running right now. So it won't find anything. So, that's the idea, that you can run Puppet itself, or you can even, kind of like that way that we saw, we were looking at the user resources on a machine. I can look at them right here from my console. And if I have, a bunch of different machines, I can go and start comparing the user resources or other resources across the machines to see if they're in my state. So this is just kind of a nice exploratory thing that I can do if I want to check in on the state of a machine. And because I got that message bus, I can also do tasks like a service restart, or tap into that Puppet resource abstraction layer to find out things about the state of other resources. I can tap into those things because I've got this message bus that's kind of secondary control plane for me. So yeah, that's how you could do that, really quick and easy. And yeah, and if you're into that, I would definitely recommend playing around with mCollective. And there's some good modules out there. There's actually even a module if you kind of get into wanting to write some of your own custom type of work. I would even go to the Forge, and I've got a module up here that is kind of popular for this, or popular amongst people that know about it. But this is like a way that you can literally set up. And if you want to have a command that you can remote execute on your machine, that you don't want people to enter in by hand, but you want to make sure it's a vetted command, this will allow you to set something up like that so that you could run an arbitrary command on a remote machine as part of your orchestration task. So yeah, definitely check out mCollective. It's quite powerful. Any other questions at this time?
No, not at this time. Anybody? Wait. As we speak, more come in. Let's see. So we got. Well, they're not more statements than questions. So.
Right.
Yeah. No. Right now, no more questions.
Cool.
But Ray has 53 pages of notes so far.
Awesome. Cool, Ray. Thank you so much for tuning in. Yeah, there's so much out there. It's interesting. Depending on where you're at, you can really get value. It's kind of like going back to that one slide where I showed you, you just manage your sudoers file, or do you just manage your, on Windows, maybe you just manage a couple of registry keys or something like that. You just start with something that's really approachable and get that handled. Write that first module for yourself. And once you've written that first module, then you start to see that the other modules that are out there, they're just, more complex versions of that same basic pattern. And then you just start, I'm going to bring that, I'm going to use one of these modules in my own module. And then then you're kind of like off to the races. Here, I literally wanted to, in this example here for mCollective, writing the mCollective, writing all the mCollective functions to, actually do something like, a remote command. It was kind of, it was onerous for me to write So I said, oh, I know a good tool for automating, creating files from templates and putting them in the right place for me and restarting a service to notice that I've got a new file in place. I'll use Puppet. And so I use Puppet here to manage and collect it. So you start seeing that, anything that's based on something you can do on your OS, something, you can drop a file, you can, work with a service, you can run an external command. You can start modeling just all sorts of things by using Puppet.
See, we do have one more question. Is there time to discuss Hira at all?
Yeah, I mean, we could do a real quick one on Hira. I call it, it is pronounced a million ways. I say Hira because it sounds like hierarchy, kind of. And that's the idea of Hira. It's all about hierarchy. And hierarchy, it's all about data. Let's just say it that way. It's all about data. And so what we've seen in some of our examples so far was, I'll go back to my learning VM example actually over here, right? So in my learning VM example, let me go here. We wrote this NTP, well, we didn't write the NTP module, but we wrote this baseline module, right? And when we look at it, we look at it and we say, like, yeah, Jeremy put in the servers here hard-coded into the Puppet code. Is that really, is that what he really wanted to do? Is that like a best practice or something? And, right, probably not, right? It would probably be nice if I could keep my data and my code separated. Well, if you noticed in that more advanced NTP module, they had a couple of little parentheses, something like that. They had stuff in between them. But implicitly in every class, there's this ability to add parameters to it. So in this case, I might want to say, well, maybe I don't want to specify the servers hard-coded. I'd like to be able to change them either from the enterprise, the Puppet Enterprise GUI, or I'd like to be able to change them somewhere else in an external data source like Hira, for example. So I could start abstracting this out. I could say, okay, I'm going to put a variable in here, a parameter called my servers, right? And now I need to send in a thing called a parameter called my servers. And I could put in a default. Maybe I put in a pool.ntp.org. Maybe that's my default for that parameter. If there's nothing, if nobody else has anything for me, if there's nothing from the console, there's nothing from Hira, well, then I'll use that. And here I'll reference it here that the servers I'd like to use are the ones that are in whatever my servers is. So this is perfectly good Puppet code. That's like a really normal thing to set up here. And if I run, the Puppet agent using that code like that, well, it's still going to have the same value for my parameter, right? Oh, it's not an array. Look at that. That was helpful. That's actually a helpful error code. It looks like it needs to be an array. Certainly it does. So let's give it the right type of let's give it the right sort of a thing here. Make it an array. Boom. Perfect. Well, then we know that worked anyway. We know that it filled in. We filled in the right value there. So let's try Puppet agent again. And now, hopefully, we won't see any change because I think the last time that we ran Puppet, we already had this value as our desired server. Yep, and so we didn't really get any changes, right? Everything's still good to go. So now I could say, okay, cool, now I've gotten it to this point. I've moved servers from here up to here, and I'm using a default here. Could I use something else? Could I get this value actually out of my code? I mean, I could leave the default maybe, or maybe I'll get rid of the default just so that we don't even see it here. Is there a way to get it like straight up out of my code? So the idea with Hira is that yes, you can get it out of your code. You would actually put it into Hira. So let's look at that just really briefly. So if I look here, I just went up a directory to the Puppet directory, and you can see this thing called Hira.yaml here. And the idea of Hira is just to be able to, it supplies key value data. Really, really simple. And it's got you can have different backends, and you can look up backends that are database backends and other backends. But I'm just using plain YAML, plain text YAML files right now. And you can see, like, how is this thing going to look things up? Well, it's going to first look in a file that's called defaults.yaml. And if it doesn't find anything in there that matches the key I'm looking for, which in this case is servers, or what was it? What did I call it? My servers or something like that. I better get that straight. Modules baseline. What did I call that? My servers. I'm going to copy that for myself here. If I don't find anything called my servers, then I'm going to look down here in, here's a variable thing. What's the certificate name of my client, right, of the agent? It'll look in there for whatever that is, .yaml. Or then it'll, if it doesn't find something there, it'll fall through and look at environment, which default is production. It'll look for a file called production.yaml. If it doesn't find anything there, in this case, it's going to look in a file called global.yaml. So you can see how you could have, things, you could set up this hierarchy any way you want. I can get rid of this defaults if I don't want to have a defaults here. And I can use any fact that I want, like operating system, any fact I want, and I can have a YAML file for it, and then I could put in there my key value pairs. And then I think it's going to be in varlib hira is the default for where the actual data is stored at. So let's just take a look here. I won't save that off, but let's do varlib. Let's see if there's any varlib hira here at the moment. There isn't at the moment. And let's take a look here. And so what I could literally do is create that directory and put some information into that, and then watch it get propagated over there. So let's see if this actually works. Let's make a hira directory, and let's go in there. And I'm going to end up using, I like environment production. How about that? That'll work. Because that's the default environment. So I'm going to go into that directory, and I'm going to make a file called production.yaml, and I'm going to do a little YAML thing, 3 dashes, and then I'm going to put in my key, which was my servers, and then I'm going to put in a value here, which is going to be an array here for this, and I'm going to, in this case it needs to be an array, so I'm going to put in this thing right here, and this is pool.ntp.org, and like that. That looks sort of like YAML, and then I should be good to go. So now let's just try, and that would be the way you would do it. You could set up this so that must pass my servers to. So for whatever reason was not finding that. So let's just take a look at that on my other machine here. Let's see how my hira.yaml is set up on this one. This one is set up a little bit differently. This one is varlib hira on Unix. Usually the way I usually set these things up is in my environments. So I usually use this environments type of workflow. And usually what I do is I set up in my particular environments, I set up specific data drs and things in there in those environments. So chances are that because I haven't set up, I've not done any hira just recently on the learning VM. I'm obviously probably getting some wires crossed on that, but the basic idea is to put your data out into these separate files like that, and then to go ahead and reference them in that sort of way. And so it is irksome, but I'm probably just like off by one on something or other. So that gives you hopefully some sort of an idea of what that looks like. And if we go back to our Etsy Puppet Labs Puppet, modules here. Let me see if I have Puppet Labs, Puppet.conf. Let me just see if there's anything in here as well. And this is kind of a good file to know about as well as you start going through a lot of the settings that you're going to have for your Puppet environment are going to be in your Puppet.conf. Yeah, and so what I'll do is maybe, if we like, I can send as a follow-up exercise how to get Hira, or as a follow-up email, how to get Hira set up properly on your learning VMs, since you all have learning VMs, because Hira is pretty darn cool, and the ability to have that data injected like that is pretty cool. But at least go to the website maybe and look up the Puppet Lab website and look up Hira for a little bit more information, and that'll give you some more kind of tips on how to get that all set up. So thanks for the question. That's a great question. Anything else before we close out?
No, it looks like any more questions? VCAC integration futures.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is using the REST API, like I showed you for classification. That's going to be a lot of, a nice way that VCAC, vRealize, whatever, whichever you'd like to call it, it's going to be able to use, so you could do things like have VCO workflows that are kicked off, and also perform classifications right at machine build time, and as well be able to start, I'm thinking, looking at doing the day 2 operations. So as you can see, just by modifying a little bit of data on your Puppet master, which you can now do in that new node classifier via the node manager via the REST API, then you're going to have the ability to have interactions between tools like VCAC and Puppet Enterprise to update the state that you desire right on that machine. So you can start out when you first build it with one state, and then as you start managing the life cycle of the machine, doing those day 2 operations, you could alter things and get new configurations pushed out in that way. So yeah, it's going to be exciting with the REST API. It's going to be really, really exciting.
Also, a link to the admin guide for VCAC.
To the admin guide for Puppet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the admin guide, it's a good question. I think I've seen some really good stuff on VM to Cloud, which is a great blog anyway. And there's a lot of good stuff here. I would start there, and I think there'll be a link that will get you to that document on that blog. It's a great blog. Cool. I think if there's not too many other questions, I think someone's going to need the room that I'm broadcasting from eventually. So it's been great, though. Thanks so much for the invite, and I hope folks got some value out of the time that we spent together.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for presenting.
No problem. Anytime.
All right. With that, I'm going to stop the recording.